freezing. I was shaking violently. My whole bed was shaking.
Right.
And so I remember being able to look up over my left shoulder and see the monitor that had my vital signs on it.
Right.
And my blood pressure said 46 over question mark. And my conscious thought as a nurse was, wow, I didn't know it could read that low. That's the last, like, really conscious thought I have.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there was this warmth and nurturing. And somewhere in there, as I'm becoming unconscious, I had a thought, which still feels like the wrong word, but thought, oh yeah, this is dying.
This is dying.
Yeah.
Our world is magnificent, filled with life in every imaginable form. But what if at the root of all these diverse forms, there was one energy, one conscious energy that created everything we know by becoming everything we know, including you. Come with us as we peek behind the curtain of what we call reality and explore the limitless wonders of consciousness in the Realization Lab. Welcome everyone to another episode of Realization Lab. I'm Jay Sherrick and
I'm David Ron.
There he is.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. And we actually have a guest. My wife saw this person who you're about to meet, Danielle. Hello, Danielle.
Hello, Danielle.
My wife saw you on this thing called the internet with an amazing story, and she was like, Jay, you have to get Danielle.
Is that the origin of this? That's awesome.
Yeah, so I hounded you.
I think hounding might be a little strong of a word. You sent an email, so.
I did send 2 emails.
Was it 2? Okay, fine, 2.
That's borderline stalking.
And Danielle, you have a lot of amazing stories, frankly. Normally, I don't let David look at the
material ahead of time.
Yeah, so that he could sort of be a fresh opinion. But he's been kind of down this past week. And he needed some sort of like spiritual upliftment. So I had him watch your episode. So he actually knows your story in advance. How did you feel about Danielle's story?
I had mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, it made me feel better. On the other hand, it freaked me out that you could fall out of a cab and hit your knee, and that would lead to your death.
I knew he was going to get hung up.
I was like, wait, she tripped and fell, and then
hold on. We're going to get into
died?
All right.
Yep.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if I can watch this.
Danielle, you're many things. You have incredible stories, but the current version of you is a death doula. You're somebody who helps people transition from life to death, I guess is how you would say it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's so fascinating about that is David is your worst nightmare. He fears death more than anyone on the planet.
A little scared.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
right?
A little
it's
scared.
Scary to go into the unknown, this thing that we don't understand.
The ultimate unknown.
Yeah,
it all scares me in some way or another. Like there's a version where it's nothing but blackness, and that scares me. There's a version where, my soul is infinite and it never dies, and that scares me.
It's a complex case here, Daniel.
There's a narrow window which will make me sort of comfortable.
What would the ideal version look like?
It wouldn't happen. I don't know. I really don't know.
Your ideal version is never die, and nobody you know ever dies.
Nobody I know dies, and there's no suffering.
Got it.
In life.
Ever. So we don't eat.
Well,
right.
I find eating kind of pleasurable.
Why?
Not for the thing being eaten.
Oh.
Right.
Well,
right.
Right. So, like, I think kind of inherently in life, there are things that happen that one could choose to see as suffering, one could choose to suffer from, or we could choose to see them as just parts of the natural rhythm of things and something that we're a part of. And how does that change how we deal with it?
Well, you're not going to fix them in one state.
I'm just wondering. Like, it's just questions, right? And that's 90% of what we do is just questions.
Just
I wonder
offer questions, open the mind. Okay, so let's get into your story a little bit, Danielle. I want to talk a little bit about your upbringing.
So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and then moved way out to the Central Valley. I had parents that they've had us young. My mom was 20 when she had me. She had a lot of unprocessed childhood trauma that she hadn't figured out how to deal with. And so some of her coping mechanisms were pretty unhealthy.
Such as?
Drinking, substance abuse.
And what was the mood in the house?
It felt like walking on eggshells because I wasn't sure who I was going to get, from mom for one day to the next or even
what
1 minute to the next. Yeah, exactly.
Mom you're going to get,
Exactly. She'd be fun and happy and a lot of fun. But then, she'd get angry and kind of these moments of rage.
Right.
And I think that very quickly I learned that the best way for me to kind of keep safe and do things was to be the perfect kid, right? Get the right grades, keep my room perfect, clean the house. Oh, can I help you with dinner?
So to keep the bad version of mom at bay, you became perfect Miss Danielle.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah. And from a very early age, I learned that opiates would be a great addition.
Oh, yeah.
A great help to kind of keep all the emotions at bay and this lovely, fuzzy kind of
happy place
buffer, between me and everything around me.
How did you first learn of the calming qualities of opiates?
She lived in the Central Valley.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Was it at school? I mean, was it, or was it
it was prescription.
Prescription, yeah.
I had actually had my tonsils and adenoids out at 11, and they gave me a liquid codeine prescription. And I was a really mature kid. I was really on top of things. And my mom, she kind of handed me my bottle, like, well, here's your medicine. Follow the directions. There you go. And I really quickly was like, this stuff's awesome. And flew through that bottle, like, way quicker than I should have. And I remember going to her and being like, so we need more of this, and her being like, that's not time for a refill. Like, you're not supposed to be done with that,
So how did that element play out now as you're moving forward? Were you able to manage to continue feeding this?
I was, and it's really fascinating to look back on because I had a ton of medical problems as a kid and as a young person.
Right.
Still some, but nowhere near compared to any of the things I did before. And so I had seizures as a kid. I had migraines. I had a congenital bone deformity that caused my lower legs to bow out and required surgery.
That's tough.
It was.
And with the operations and all these other challenges, there was some opportunity to get a hold of some prescriptions. Is that how you kept everything going?
There was always some prescription, because there was always something happening. And there was especially then, there was zero intention of like, I'm going to be sick to get medicine. Right? My body showed up the way I unconsciously asked it to. And gave me every reason to go to the doctor and get these prescriptions and have procedures and whatnot. And so it's that really interesting mind, body, spirit connection thing.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting because subconsciously you're really wanting these prescriptions, and the way to get them that you saw from your tonsillectomy is, get sick, go to the doctor, get a prescription.
Absolutely.
That's really
and it's also that's a really, really hard thing to come to for yourself and to admit to yourself, right? Yeah. Because it's taking radical responsibility and ownership over the processes happening in your body.
Yeah.
Some part of this is serving me, and I have to own up to those parts. What are the benefits of holding on to this illness? What are the benefits of holding on to chronic pain? Because they're there.
So take us then a little bit through your life. So tell me about what the next big milestone is in your life.
Yeah, so I graduated high school at 17, and immediately after that summer, I did an EMT course, and then started working out in the field. Right. And that entire time, still underlying very functional opiate addiction, right? Always knowing that I had something available. If the day was really tough, it was like, I could just pop a Norco.
You're a functioning addict who's working as an EMT doctor.
Yes. And then I went to Cal State East Bay, and I ended up getting my bachelor's in science of nursing there. And I was a great nurse. You wanted to be in my room if something bad was happening. And the minute I got off work, Like the minute I was in my car, it was like, here's the pill bottle, right? Pop a couple pills on my way home so that they're hitting by the time I get home so I can go to sleep.
You're like Nurse Jackie.
Totally.
Maisie watched that show. She loved it, and she could have just watched you.
And the thing was, I was really, really good. I was so perfectionist that I never used on the job. The minute I got off, absolutely. Yeah. But like at work, no. Like that was off limits. And I never, purchased drugs on the street or from somebody else. It was like, this is a prescription. I'm not a junkie.
Right. So you were in denial.
Totally. Again, I needed this. This was medication.
Yeah. And it came from a doctor. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you've got a complex life going on. What's happening in your personal life at this time?
In my personal life, I was in a relationship with a gentleman from about 19 to 27, and we had actually gotten married somewhere about the 5-year mark. And that relationship was really, really challenging for me. He was 8 years older.
Another challenge in your life.
I know. Yes, exactly.
He was 8 years older.
Very, very controlling. It very quickly morphed into mental and emotional abuse, never anything physical. But things like, I would have to have my outfit approved before I was allowed to leave the house.
I have David call me and get his outfit approved before he leaves the house.
You don't want me showing up, unapproved.
Do you call that abuse, David?
Yeah, I don't know. I might look back on it at some point.
That's horrible. Your outfit had to be approved. What other kinds of what else was going on in that relationship?
Just really negative comments and hurtful stuff. Just lots of hurtful, digging things meant to keep me small and controlled. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you were the type of person that allowed this to happen to you because your sense of self had not been, it sounds, properly nurtured as a child.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. So I just found new ways to reenact my family patterns. Yeah. Which I think that's what we do over and over again until we become aware of them.
Yeah. And it sounds like at some point this relationship came to an end.
The relationship did come to an end. He and I ended up having a miscarriage in October of 2010. And his response to that experience was exactly what kind of finally gave me the guts to be like, I need out of here.
His response was what?
Do we need to go to the hospital?
Wow.
Oh, we don't even... Oh, his response was, it's
what's
no big
done
deal? Is that sort of thing? Okay.
Yeah.
That was the response.
Wow.
Okay.
Do we need to go to the hospital?
Yeah.
No, I got it. Thank you. Okay.
And that was the miscarriage?
That was it.
Yeah, and that was the wake-up call for you.
Yes. And so I don't want to get crazy out of order here, but years later, I was at a conference with a woman named Anita Morjani, and she did an exercise where we did a meditation, and we were supposed to be trying to connect with past loved ones.
Can I just interrupt for people who don't know? Anita Morjani is the author of a best-selling New York Times book about a near-death experience that she had. It's an incredible book. And so she's giving a conference. This is after you've had your near-death experience, I guess. Yes. You went to the conference to hear her.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're at this conference with Anita, and what happens?
So, this was only a few years ago, maybe 2021. And we're supposed to be trying to connect with past loved ones. And so I mentally kind of ran through the list of my loved ones that have died. And as I'm sitting there, she says, ask them to come forward. And my hands were resting in my lap. And all of a sudden it felt like there was the weight of a baby in my arms. Oh. And I felt almost like the exact feeling of like a hospital receiving blanket. Like that scratchy sort of been washed a million times with the pink and blue stripes. And then she gives a prompt to ask them, if they have any messages for you.
So this is in your mind, you've sort of connected psychically, let's say, with this child that miscarried.
Correct.
And Anita says, does this child have any messages for you?
Mm-hmm. And so I basically kind of, in my mind's eye, looked down in my lap at this, what I knew to be a male baby somehow. It was far too early to have known that in reality, but I just knew that. And it was kind of like, well, what are you doing here, is how I said it. And the response was, I needed you to know your worth.
Wow.
And that experience was, like I said, what prompted me to leave that relationship. And so it was this beautiful moment of, understanding something that, again, was so painful that had real value and purpose for me that I didn't understand at the time.
So that's an incredible story. So this child came into your life with the express purpose of creating a miscarriage so that you could get out of that relationship and get on a path to understanding what your value was and who you really are in life.
That was my understanding.
That's so amazing. And it's, at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking to David about, David didn't want any suffering in life. And this is such a perfect, powerful example of how something, quote unquote, bad and caused anguish and suffering for you particularly was really just this beautiful blessing in your life that moved you out of a very, a dysfunctional situation and into a better direction in life. Wow.
Absolutely. There's purpose and value to all of our experiences. The facts are the facts, right? The things are happening as they are, but the suffering is a choice. It's usually unconscious. We don't know we're choosing it, but it's a choice.
And this was a lot of the wisdom and the perspective that you gained from your near-death experience.
Yes, definitely.
So I want to get towards that.
Yeah.
So you get out of this relationship. Did you end up? I know you ended up meeting someone a little bit nicer, I hope.
Yes. So actually, he and I had been working together for 2 years in the ER while I was married to my ex. And really good friends, became great friends because I was married. I was off limits,
right.
And he's a few years younger. And so, right. I was giving him advice on dating and helping him get girls. And we developed
classic
a great
rom-com plot.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Very Grey's Anatomy minus the, soirees and the broom closet.
And all the opioids, probably.
Yeah.
Or maybe they've got those on Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, they probably do.
But so he and I started dating pretty much instantly and got married 9 months later.
Oh, wow.
Sweet.
And that was 14 and a half years ago, and we're married today and absolute love of my life. Sometimes you got to get it wrong to get it right.
Exactly. And did you guys decide to have children or not have children or?
That was a decision that was taken away from us with all of my sickness stuff. And he was unaware of my opiate addiction. This was very hush-hush and quiet. He was completely unaware of what I was doing.
How was your husband unaware of your addiction? How were you able to hide that?
Because I was working 2 jobs, sometimes 60 hours a week, and working night shift. And so for me to be passing out on the couch first thing when I came home, or looking exhausted and nodding off frequently, didn't seem that out of ordinary.
I get that.
I am curious about, because you're about to get into the NDE, did your personality change? Because
totally.
Because you come across right now as someone who's very, you've got a lightness and an effervescence and an optimism and an ebullience that sort of jumps out of you.
An effervescence which David wants.
I long for it. I long for effervescence, ebullience, lightness, all of the things that you seem to possess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very different from how I was. And it's funny because my husband refers to pre-NDE Danielle as Nurse Danielle. Right? So we're getting Nurse Jackie. Nurse Danielle. And we only even talk about it now if if I need to be a bitch, then it's oh, don't make her bring out Nurse Danielle. Because that was a completely different human that walked around with this wall up and this shell and very much this stay away, I'll get you before you get me, person.
Wow.
Still very nurturing and caretaking, right, as a nurse, but also just this underlying, I just knew that the world was out to get me. I knew that I had no value and worth. I knew that I needed to remain small and yet felt confined by all of that and didn't get it.
Yeah. Wow, and it's interesting that your husband fell in love with you even though you were a bitch.
I know. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah, you fell in love with Nurse Danielle.
Yeah. And
basically he cheated on you.
A little bit. At one point I asked him, I was so I'm a little self-conscious. did you like that? And he was like, I loved that. He's like, but I didn't know that this was an option. I was like, neither did I. I was like, it was a great response.
That's a perfect response.
Yes, it was.
That's a way better response than do we have to go to the hospital?
Yes. It's a very different response.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been married for how long when we get to this fateful moment?
Only a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Very fresh. Yeah. And we only dated for 9 months prior to that. So it was a really new relationship.
Right. And so tell us what happened.
So I went out with a group of girlfriends and we were drinking far too much. And at some point, I was pretty much blacked out. I don't actively remember the fall. But as I was getting out of the limo, my heel caught and I came down on the curb on my knee. And like all good nurses do, and I'm sure I had some pain pills in my purse, popped a couple of those. There was a CVS on the corner. And we popped in there and grabbed an ACE wrap, and the ER nurses I was with wrapped it up real tight, and we continued about our night.
Wow.
And the next morning, I spent the night with a girlfriend of mine, and as I was getting out of bed, and I went to step down the next morning, and like my leg just kind of collapsed. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I was wondering how that was going to be. How are you?" You know, and it was like, then it all kind of came back to me. And it wasn't until 11 days later that I demanded an MRI because the x-rays were negative that we found out that I had actually fractured my femur. It didn't require surgery, but required immobilization for 8 weeks.
So you had to miss work for 8 weeks and you were basically bed rest.
Yes. Yep. Sitting in a lazy boy with my, leg up on pillows and in an immobilizer. And
how did you take to that?
Not well.
Not well at all.
Yeah. At that point in my life, I was completely incapable of being still.
I was going to say, all that quiet distraction is very helpful for avoiding all the demons that are sort of lurking.
Exactly. Yes. So, and now I have this new injury, so I've got more medicine. I've got more opiates on board now.
Yeah.
And so after that 8 weeks, I am better enough to go back to work, and I needed to make up some PTO, some time off because I had exhausted all of it. And so I worked a few doubles back to back.
Right.
And getting off my final double, my leg was really red and really swollen and hurt a lot. And that final day, somewhere around 8 or 9 in the morning, I was standing in my bathroom and I passed out in our bathroom because I didn't know it at the time, but I had a blood clot in that leg that then traveled up into my lungs and sudden shortness of breath, passed out.
Oh, wow.
This is David's favorite part of
so that can happen? Okay. So
that can happen.
So wait, so you had a blood clot because you had pushed too hard?
No, from basically being immobilized. So the sitting around and not having blood movement and having it, elevated for a continued period of time.
If we stay on David's schedule, we'll talk about the medical stuff forever.
All day.
So you collapse in your bathroom and you're taken to a hospital?
Not for a while, because part of, my addiction was that I had come home and taken a bunch of pills. So I had taken, a pain pill, a sleeping pill, and Benadryl because the pain pill used to make me itchy, right? So now I've got all of these things on board that are sedative.
Sedatives, yeah.
And the way I passed out, my head and upper body were on the inside of our tub, and like the edge of the tub was sitting kind of across my hips.
You fell over the tub, the rail of the tub.
I totally folded over the edge. So my legs were hanging out the outside.
Yeah.
And so with the combination of blood clot, all of these meds on board, I stayed out for hours in that position.
Which probably is not a healthy position.
Definitely not a healthy position. And so my husband got off work somewhere around 7:30 p.m. because he worked day shift. We were opposite each other. And I came to hearing him rinsing his lunch dishes in the sink and pushed myself kind of up out of the bathtub. My legs didn't work at all. Couldn't move them. So he sees me laying on the ground kind of out of it and freaks out, obviously, picks me up, puts me on our bed, and immediately called 911.
Right.
And so then I was taken to the hospital. But so it was hours in that position. Wow.
So he didn't ask, do we need to go to the hospital?
He did not.
Okay.
He did not. He was on top of it immediately.
And so you go to the hospital. What happens?
They discover, this large blood clot in my lungs. I was also in kidney failure. because the way I was positioned in the bathroom cut blood flow off to my legs. When muscles don't get blood flow, they die. When that protein is released into the blood, it clogs up the kidneys. And so it causes kidney failure. Something called rhabdomyolysis.
One more thing to worry about.
There's a new one for you, Dan.
I'm creating a hypochondriac as we speak, right?
Oh, you're not creating it.
It's been here? Okay, guys. I'm just fueling the fire.
Yeah.
All right, so you're in pretty bad shape. After a lifetime of having medical issues, you have now gotten to a place where you're really in crisis.
Yes, this is by far the sickest I've ever been. And so I entered the hospital at 167 pounds, and on day 10, even though I was on continuous dialysis, I still was gaining fluid weight to the point where at day 10 I was 209 pounds.
Wow.
And a resident decided she was going to help relieve some of that pressure by doing a procedure incorrectly where she accidentally perforated my bowels.
Oh, God.
And
she was going to try and relieve some of the fluid buildup, and sounds like she wasn't necessarily the best trained of the people in the hospital. And
yes, wrong procedure, wrong time, done the wrong way.
3 strikes.
You basically died.
Correct, eventually. So then, slowly over the next couple of days, I was leaking poop into my belly and becoming more and more septic.
Right.
And I think it was around day 2.5 after that procedure that they realized what was happening and they rushed me to the OR.
Right.
They did 3 different surgeries up and down, just trying to clean out all of the dead tissue and keep me alive, basically.
Right.
Wow.
And there was a big incision down the middle. And the kind of stitches they used are called retention sutures, which are kind of like wire twisty ties. You know, it's like what you use for open heart surgery.
Okay.
And 7 days after that big surgery, they had to restart the blood thinning medicine because I still had the blood clot in my lung. So they restarted heparin. That caused this entire incision to bleed out.
Oh, God.
So what ultimately killed you? Loss of blood?
Loss of blood. Yes. And so this is part of the challenge of my story is that I had rapid intubations, which means that they give you a bunch of medication, sedate you really quickly, and put in a breathing tube.
Right.
And then I also had full resuscitation efforts. And then I also had near resuscitation efforts in a 3.5-month hospital stay. And so I don't know for sure during which one of those my NDE happened.
Oh, because you were just gone, but at some point you died and this experience happened.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I believe the bulk of all of the things that I remember happened as this incision was bleeding out.
Yeah.
So it's bleeding, and there are doctors and nurses all around my bed plumping blood products in. And I was in complete shock. I mean, I was freezing. I was shaking violently. My whole bed was shaking.
Right.
And so I remember being able to look over my left shoulder and see the monitor that had my vital signs on it.
Right.
And my blood pressure said 46 over question mark. And my conscious thought as a nurse was, wow, I didn't know it could read that low.
Yeah.
You know, commenting on the sensitivity of the machine. And that's the last, really conscious thought I have.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there was this warmth and nurturing and comforting. Even as I was still present in the room, I was no longer cold. I stopped shaking. And somewhere in there, as I'm becoming unconscious, I had a thought, which still feels like the wrong word, but thought, oh yeah, this is dying. Simple.
This is dying.
It was a remembrance. It was very much something I had done before. It was not the least bit scary.
Wow.
I never did the portion a lot of NDEers do where you see yourself from above. You know, you're separated from your body, but you're still in 3D reality.
Right.
It's like the second I was out, I was somewhere else.
Right.
I did not experience anything in 3D reality then.
But your experience is first this great comfort and warmth and well-being, it sounds like. And then the next thing is, oh, I remember this. This is death. And there's no fear involved. It's like, oh, it's kind of sounded like a relief a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
I see, even as you say it now, my shoulders drop and it's this instant, it was complete relief, and it was so normal.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like, oh yeah, this is going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Yeah, just another thing that we do. And from that point on, everything felt simultaneous. So it has been really challenging for me, even after all of this time, to find ways to put it into language.
Yeah.
To find language that makes sense. Yeah.
Because everything feels like it's all happening in the same present moment. There's no delineation of time, is what you're saying. And so
Correct.
In order to tell a story here in our world, you have to kind of create a linear structure for it. But really your experience was it's all now.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it very much felt I was completely like outside of the constructs of space and time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're within them right now and we're kind of stuck in this whatever it is, but it was outside of that.
But I invite you to tell the story linearly, since we're all here on the planet Earth and we want to know what happened.
That's the only way I can do it now, right?
Okay, good.
And it's one of those things that I feel like I need to say every time, because folks want to take the words very literally, and because they get a picture in their mind of what this is and was, and just know that it is so far from what it really was. It's an approximation.
Your words can't possibly convey the grandeur and the expanse of this experience. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay, so tell us what happens.
So at some point, I found myself below the light. Now, prior to this experience, when somebody would kind of describe, seeing the light, I always pictured like a tunnel, like with a flashlight or a train headlight at the end with this darkness. And it was not like that at all. It was very much like when you're a little kid and you're swimming and you maybe dive down and sit on the bottom of the pool, or you're down deep under the water and you look up and you know where the sun is, but it's like diffuse and sparkling around the edges. And it was very much that. And it was above me. But when I say me, I was not Danielle.
Yeah.
I was what I refer to in my mind as me. And I'm currently playing the role of Danielle.
Right.
But I didn't have a body. I don't know what I was or what I looked like. But I could see spherically, like complete global vision, up, down, sides, everywhere. And I, like I said, didn't have arms or legs or any way to push or propel myself upwards.
Right.
And so I knew that this light was everything. It was where I had come from, where I was supposed to go back to. It was home. It was mother, father, sister, brother. Like, it was everything. It was my entire being knew that I was of this light. I belonged in this light, and I somehow needed to get back in it. Right. And because I couldn't push or propel, I had no way of getting there. And I had a sense of desperation in that moment. Because again, I just knew I needed to get there.
Yeah.
And because it was above me, and I think because it had these remembrances, of kind of being underwater, it felt like drowning to me. Not because it was painful. Right. Not because I couldn't breathe, but just because I was desperate to get in.
Like helpless and stuck underwater.
And that I needed that light just as much as I need to breathe oxygen now.
Yeah.
Was it panicky? Like you're drowning and you're panicking?
No, not panicky, but desperate. How do I...
Gotta get there.
Which is kind of surprising because, you think of people go into these experiences and you think it's all so peaceful, but here you are actually experiencing a sense of anxiety on some level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. It was like I knew I had to do this thing and didn't understand how, didn't know what I was supposed to do to get there, so that level of desperation.
But what's interesting is you have this built-in absolute longing to move in that direction. Yeah.
Absolutely. The words we use are unconditional love, but it is so far beyond that. Even the term unconditional is a condition. We don't have a way of expressing this. And I now see that energy, that love, that source as kind of, it's not only like whatever's creating all of this, but it's also the glue that holds all of it together somehow. It doesn't make a lot of sense in my intellectual mind, but I know it to be all it is.
So even while we were just talking about there being a sense of desperateness, I think was the word you used, but the whole thing is still wrapped and infused in this experience of unconditional love that you can't even put into words.
Yes, and that's why it's so hard, because I've never felt that feeling here on the planet. I don't have a word for it.
Yeah.
Like if every human on the planet could wrap you in their love in one moment, it wouldn't come close to what this was.
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so at some other point, or at the same time, I found myself in what felt like it felt mechanical. It was large enough to be like a huge room, but it was not constructed like any room I've ever been in before. It was circular, and it was arranged like an old Kodak slide carousel,
yes,
or like a revolving door.
So it's got a lot of, you're in the center, and there's all these sort of partitions that are surrounding you. That's what
yes,
you're saying?
Yes.
And now this is an experience, because there's no time, it's sort of happening all at the same time, but this is sort of a separate experience from that light being above you. Okay, this
Correct.
is like, okay. Mm-hmm. So you're in this giant Kodak carousel slide projector. Mm-hmm. What's happening?
Again, I can see spherically.
Right.
Like these, I call them cells in my mind. Cell
right.
makes sense.
Right.
They were arranged all around me, 360, and each one of these individual slides or cells was somehow simultaneously a photograph that I could look at, like third person, like a video or 3D rendering of an experience that I could look at, like a movie.
Like a hologram or something.
Yes. But I was somehow also in the scene as myself, so experiencing it first person.
These are experiences, scenes from your life.
Correct.
The life as Danielle that you had lived up to this point. So there's a lot of pill taking going on, and
it was everything. I mean, it was everything from, I mean, I was 30 when this happened, so it was everything. I mean, there were moments of infanthood and toddlerhood and things. Everything. It was everything.
Yeah.
But so I could experience it as myself, but it wasn't just from my own perspective, but also from the perspective of everyone else also in that memory or scene.
Right. So this is what's so amazing about your experience. Because we hear this, like when you die, you kind of go and you review your life and you look back and, I'm glad I did that. Oh, I think I could do better with that, or whatever it is. But in this review, which is what this carousel is, right? And it's all these experiences of your life. You're seeing all the moments of your life, but you're seeing them from the perspective of not only re-experiencing it as you in that moment, but everyone else who was party to that moment. You're
Correct.
Getting their experience as well.
Yes. And because I was able to do both somehow, right? My perspective split in like 4 ways somehow simultaneously, that I could re-experience what Danielle had in that moment, while also feeling in very real time the effect of my words and my actions, but also my thoughts and my energy, right? The unseen things that were going on in the background for Danielle. What was I really thinking and feeling as I was saying and doing this, and how did that affect this other person as well?
So when you looked at one of these scenes and Danielle in that scene had a thought, which maybe was kind of kept secret because you're acting in one way, trying to make an impression one way, but deep down you're feeling another way. That sort of hidden motive, that hidden agenda is still affecting the people in the scene.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
I wouldn't even call it a motive or an agenda. It's just a hit. It's just a private thought.
Private thought. Yeah. David is correcting us here.
Yeah,
so.
it's a private.
You're right. Yeah.
It's a private thought that we all have in every situation that we come into contact with other human beings, and you're saying that thought had an effect on that other person just by thinking it.
Yes, so it's thoughts are things.
I'm so screwed.
Right, but thoughts can either heal or they can harm, right? And your energy can heal or it can harm. We either send people in a more positive, a more negative, or a neutral position, right? Just a matter of physics than when we first encountered them.
Yeah. And not only other people, but yourself too. I mean, you're
Absolutely.
basically,
Yes.
you're having that effect on yourself as well. So
Yeah.
why do you think you're having this moment, this incredible perspective?
Because I was dying. Like, there was there was zero question about this process or exactly what was happening here. It was like, the timeless self me, the grander me, was reviewing all of Danielle's experiences and not judging them in a, oh, that was good, that was bad, you're going to the good or the bad place.
Right.
But from a place of a mother teaching their kid how to do something, for the first time. And
very lovingly.
Very lovingly. And oh, yeah, that one didn't feel good, huh? Yeah, see, when you did this, but you felt that, see how that felt? That's inauthentic. See how that didn't feel good in your body? See how that feels out of alignment? Yeah, see, we don't want to do it like that. Okay, see how that felt better? And so it was very much that feeling that I was reviewing all of Danielle's experiences with. And the benefit, I believe, too, of seeing and feeling it simultaneously with internally and what the other person was, is I could compare and contrast, right? What being authentic felt like for other people, how other people receive authenticity and true kindness and empathy and good intention versus how they receive good actions without good intention. It's very different.
Were there instances where you had done the good action, but you're kind of resenting the experience a little bit, but you're doing a good, and what happened in those situations?
Honestly, I think that was most of my situations prior to my NDE. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was very much acting from
the way you should be, what you thought was the right thing to do, and yet there's all this inner turmoil, and there's maybe a sense of resentment or a sense of conflict, at least, about doing all this.
And I was also so sensitive and empathic that I didn't know, honestly, where I stopped and someone else started as far as their needs and mine.
Oh, yeah.
And so I needed other people to be okay in order for me to be okay.
Yeah.
So most of my giving and caretaking was essentially selfish.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing it to make them okay. I was doing it to make me okay.
Which really very much explains the abusive relationship you're in, because here you are trying to make this person okay because that's how you thought you could make yourself feel okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was an impossible task.
So I think that's why I needed to experience it that way in order to understand, right? Because if somebody had explained that to me intellectually, I mean, conceptually, I think I kind of get it, but I needed to feel it.
In this moment, is there a sense of my mind is being blown, or is this all seem so very natural to you?
At the time, it felt very natural.
Yeah.
It's so hard to describe other than I know I've done it before.
Yeah.
And maybe I've done it lots and lots of times.
But it's so interesting that it's very normal for when we leave this plane of existence that, oh yeah, now I get to understand how my actions, and then we come back and that normality, that piece of information is sort of erased from our memory banks so we can, I don't know exactly why, but so we can, learn to do it without the carousel.
Well, yeah, and that I think that if we really knew, if we really remembered, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Why play the game? The game is only fun when the illusion is in place.
Exactly. There would be no drama at all. We'd all be, saying positive things and being really nice to everyone and taking care of ourselves and loving ourselves. And
it'd be like watching a play and the curtains are up in the backstage the entire time.
Yeah.
You know, and you're just like, well, this isn't fun anymore. I can see everything they're doing, you know?
Right. Because you were having so much fun before you died.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of your big questions, right, David? Is like, David always says this, it's like, well, if God is all powerful or divine or whatever,
and I'm supposed to come here to learn and
why don't they just
fucking
show me that this would do it,
and
I'll learn
like, you know, don't put me through all this.
Yeah, I get it. And I hate to use this comparison because I don't see God as some patriarchal parent in that way.
But male, he is male, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. Like so far beyond gender. Like it's so funny. Okay. That it's very similar to with kids, right? If you told them everything, they wouldn't learn it. Number one, they wouldn't listen to you.
Right.
And two, that's not how they grow. That's not how they become their own person. That's not how they expand, right? Is if we feed them everything for their entire lives. Like at some point you gotta go figure it out.
I think it's so interesting. This is the second time you've made a reference where you're talking from the point of view of a mother, and you're so clearly a brilliant mother, and yet in this lifetime there were other tasks to attend to. But you're so naturally this mother.
You've probably done it before.
Yeah.
One of my first clients as a death doula, I only met her one day before we were actually at active dying time vigil. And her sister and her best friend were sitting kind of at the sides of her bed, kind of up at the head of the bed, and I was sitting at the foot of the bed. And we're talking and sharing memories, and I'm keeping an eye on her breathing, and I recognize she's getting to take her last breaths. And I tell these women, hey, we might want to pay attention. These are the last few breaths she's taking now. And they both turned and like quickly looked at me, and visibly with my eyes open, I saw little girl faces. And it was just this moment of like, oh, this is my mothering. They don't have to be children, and they didn't have to come out of my body, but these are grown adults who no one has walked through this process before. No one has normalized this for them. No one's taught them how to do this. And I get to be that kind of nurturer and mother. Yeah. And so it was this beautiful moment of like, this is why I don't have biological children. I couldn't be here in the middle of the night if I had little kids at home.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're experiencing all these moments from your life. You're having this much broader perspective of it because it's not just what you're able to see within yourself, which is so clear, but now you're seeing what all these other people, how it ripples out into the world in terms of the influence you're having in all these other people's lives.
Yes, very much so. It can feel like a huge responsibility to be aware that your thoughts have so much of an effect.
Yeah.
And so I caution people to not get so wrapped up in the possibly negative side of that or the bad side of that, and just to recognize that you have a beautiful opportunity. You know, and so when you do have a negative or judgmental thought, when you catch it, to just be like, oh, there's my humanness. Okay, I love you. Sorry about that. Next. Like, and just move on. Like, it's an opportunity to do and be better, not to get wrapped up in judgment and shame spirals, because that's just as detrimental as the first negative thought you had to begin with.
I think that's such an important point, and I want to reiterate it by saying that, you know, I think you know from my story that for many, many years I spoke with this energy, which was called guidance, through this woman, Kathy. She mediumed, and I would get many of my spiritual understandings via them. And they would say very similar to that. They would say, it's not the negative thought, that's just being human. It's your judgment of the negative thought which actually has a creative power to it. So, you know, if we have negative thoughts, that's just what we're supposed to have, positive and negative. That's the duality of the world. But the thing that we really have the opportunity to shift is our self-judgment and putting ourselves down and getting all wrapped up in that, because that just perpetuates it and adds energy to it, and then it becomes a creative process.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you, guidance.
Yes, thank you, guidance.
Blech.
David has to endure all this like
I
kindness and goodwill. It's awful for him.
Dripping all over you.
He's like melting like the witch in the Wizard of Oz. It's like, he's got a fan him. It's okay, David. Hang in there. Okay. So you're in this carousel. Everything's happening simultaneously. What happens from there?
So at first I had time to kind of really sit with and be in each one of these scenes and memories. Again, it felt very mechanical, and that it would like click over to the next scene, and all of a sudden I was in the next one. And then it would like click into the next one. And eventually that clicking started happening faster and faster. And as it did so, it's spinning, and it seemed as if it was creating some sort of like suction force, or like this vortex that started to form as it was spinning.
Right.
Almost like a reverse whirlpool that started to pull me upwards. And again, there was no ceiling above me.
Right.
But as I'm being pulled upwards, I knew that if I crossed this invisible threshold, there was no coming back.
Right.
And so as I'm getting pulled up, it was the first time I thought about 3D reality. Like I thought about Danielle and Danielle's life and my husband, Luke.
Right.
And the second I thought about him, I knew I had to go back to say goodbye.
Wow.
I had the intention to continue on. Every part of me knew that I was going to keep doing this.
But I have to at least go say goodbye to Luke.
Yes. So for a little bit more of the backstory, I was about, a month to 6 weeks into my hospital admission at this point. He hadn't really ever left the hospital. He was not eating, he wasn't showering, he stunk, like he'd lost a ton of weight. And so his brother convinced him to go home that night, and the two of them had shared a bottle of Jack. And they were passed out. And one of my girlfriends, who is another ER nurse, was in the hospital with me when all of this bleeding episode was happening. And so she's calling and texting him, you need to get back to the hospital, you need to get back to the hospital, and he's missing all of that.
Oh my
gosh. So in real time, what's happening is you're dying, and he's not there. He's been there the whole
drinking.
time. Yeah.
Yes.
He's having a little break because it's been really tough for a long time. Oh, and do you think on some level you in this other arena, this other sphere, is knowing that he's in trouble?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
I knew that if I left this way, he was not going to be okay.
You just had this knowingness about that.
Yes, absolutely. And if he had been at the hospital, if he had been there when I passed out, if I had had the opportunity to say goodbye, I would not be here. I 100% feel like I have Jack Daniels to thank for my life because I would not be here.
Spoken like a true Southern rocker.
If you had said goodbye, you think Luke could have had the closure he needed to have pulled it through and moved on had you passed?
He most definitely would have struggled, but he wouldn't hold the guilt of going home and not being there and getting drunk.
Oh. Because he had been so dedicated, he was there all the time, and this is the moment when he was off duty. He took a little break, and if you had died then, it would have crushed him. He would have felt responsible in a way for your death. Yeah, because the message would have been the second I left her side, she died, and so and he would have blamed
And do you think it was designed that way for some reason?
100%. Yep.
I love how certain you are, Dan.
Zero question.
Yeah,
because again, it's too many coincidences, right? Too much of this is set up in order for everything to have happened the way it did.
Right.
Yeah.
I 100% believe that was part of the plan.
That's pretty cool. That's amazing. I mean, the intricacy and the levels and the strands are getting interwoven. Okay, so you're getting sucked up into good stuff, stuff that you're sort of
Whatever it was, yeah.
But on some level, there's this knowingness, I've got to get back to Luke or he's not going to make it. And so what happens?
So I knew I had to go say goodbye, and I would be right back. It really felt like I kind of put my finger up at God, if you will, and was just like, give me a second. I got to do a thing. I'll be right back. Which is insane, but it's also so me. I knew that meant I had to get back in my body.
Yeah.
And it was really, really painful and broken at that point.
That's a pretty messed up body to get back into.
Oh, yeah. And I really didn't want to get back in my body. Yeah. And at the same time, then the way I realized I could get out of this thing was almost like my idea was like, I'm just going to break it.
This thing being the carousel that you're kind of spinning, and it's going faster and faster and faster. Can I ask you real quick about the faster and faster? When it's going faster and faster, is all that information, are you absorbing all that information?
So as I'm being pulled up, the further and further up I got, it became really, really clear that the whole point was compassion and connection.
Your whole lifetime had been about compassion and connection.
That every instance of finding it, fostering it, cultivating it, showing it, felt amazing.
Right.
Anywhere where I had blocked it or pushed it away or chosen something else, chosen fear, chosen judgment instead, felt horrible.
Now, was compassion and connection the purpose, the meaning of your life, Danielle's life, this one time, or do you think that's universal, that's for everyone?
I think it's one of the things that's kind of one of the universal themes, but I don't think that that's always kind of what the main point for each person's life is. Yeah, person. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So now we got to get back to Luke, because so you're getting sucked up. You're getting all this information about compassion and connection. It's all blurring into one big thematic whole that you're now seeing. And you're like, okay, hold on, source. Yeah. I'll be right back. And then how do you get to Luke?
So
you broke
again,
the
and
machine.
This one makes no sense to me.
The machine,
yeah, you broke God's machine.
I wanted to. That was the plan.
Yeah.
Was I didn't have a body, but my thought was like, I'm gonna like shove my arm, which I didn't have at the time, but I punched through this spinning thing. Like I was gonna literally just like jam the gear.
Or putting like a stick in the bike tire, in the spokes of the bike tire, yeah.
And I made this motion, and in 3D reality, I had been re-intubated, so I was back on a ventilator, and I hadn't been responding to doctors or nurses.
So you're slipping.
Yes.
You're in a coma, and you're on your way out.
Correct. And it was somewhere around like 10, 11 in the morning. He wakes up, gets all of these calls and messages, flies to the hospital. And I think that when I shoved my arm through this thing, that's when he gets to my bedside and is holding my hand and yelling in my ear, squeeze my hand, squeeze my hand. I found his hand on the other side. Like we did this like sliding, cliffhangering, almost by fingernails moment. And it felt like he pulled me through and I was like back into my body.
That's incredible. I mean, that's amazing. So you're in this other realm, you put your hand through, and he's in the real world holding your hand, and it feels to you like he pulls you back into your body almost.
Yes. It felt like, again, if you picture like a gear or a cog or like a old water wheel, it felt extremely cartoonish. Right. And like I had to completely flatten out in order to go through this spinning thing, and it was pulled to my right. I keep doing it.
Yeah.
And like it was, and I hear the noise even. It sounds like, sounds so bad, but you know the noise when the jellied cranberry sauce at Thanksgiving, drop it out of the can?
When you get it out of the can, yeah. That's
it was similar to that sound, this sort of, but I was like sucked back into my body.
Wow.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I felt so small and so confined, and it hurt like hell. That was when things got confusing. Yeah. Prior to that, like, that all made sense wherever else I was. And then all of a sudden, it was like...
Now you're struggling for your life again, and you're in a body that's broken, and
Yes. And I don't know exactly how much physical time passed thereafter before I actually became conscious again.
Right.
But the hospitalization continued for another 6 weeks or so after that.
And from the moment when you became conscious again in this life, you still had the memory of what had happened?
I was still so confused because there were moments of actual hallucination, actual ICU delirium. And so like that whole time period is super fuzzy and really weird.
So you just really piqued David's interest. I didn't even look at him, but I just felt here's a way that I can explain
this away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can make all of this fit. I can go back into my little box.
Did it feel different than, I mean, like,
Yes.
the reason, I mean, like, as you're describing some of this, I remember a time in my life where I lost consciousness for probably 20 seconds, maybe even less. And in that time, I had this crazy dream. And it felt like it was like an all-nighter, like an all-night dream with all of these details, and then I opened my eyes thinking I was still in this dream that I was having. And then slowly I was like, oh no, I understand what just happened, but like
that's what happens to me when I pass out.
But like in that 20 seconds, I had this like crazy elaborate experience.
So what in your mind, Danielle, that experience, which I actually 100% know that, do you consider that just chemicals in his brain, or does he like leave his body, or what? You have no idea.
Yeah,
You're the expert, Danielle.
Right? No,
Come
who
on.
knows? And I don't know the answer. And I just got an email from a woman this morning that came right out, and it was like, well, how do you know that this wasn't just DMT in your brain? Like, how do you know that? And I don't know for sure, of course. What I do know is that since my NDE, I've experimented and worked with a fair amount of plant medicines and a fair amount of psychedelics, and I've had some incredibly profound experiences with that. Those experiences fade. The memory of those experiences fades similarly to a dream. This not only has not faded, it almost in some ways has become more intense.
Okay, but have you had any, are there any experiences in life that have allowed you to at least move closer to confirming, yes, this was a true, actual experience, like this was me living in the afterlife for a period of time?
There is that. So my experience was all in 2013, and then fast forward to 2018, I had a small cleaning business, and I was cleaning for a gentleman who was, for all intents and purposes, a hoarder. And his wife had actually kind of snuck me in to do some cleaning while he was off at a medical appointment.
Right.
And I was cleaning his office, and there were just stacks and stacks of papers, 3-4 feet high on every surface. And maybe 3/4 of the way down on this 3-foot stack of paper, I was dusting around everything, and out of nowhere, I kind of set my stuff down and reached in and grabbed a report folder out of this huge stack of paper.
Wait, why did you grab that particular report?
That's a great question.
Oh.
I still have zero idea. In fact, as I was doing it, I was actively scolding myself, knowing that it was totally inappropriate. I'd never read anybody's stuff or gone through people's things while I'm cleaning. Like, what are you doing as I'm doing it? And so I sit down and start reading, and it was like a report written in the early mid-'80s, done on a typewriter, yellowed all around the edges, probably been in that stack for years. And I came to realize that it was a thesis paper that a college student had written on near-death experiences. And the man that I was cleaning for had an NDE in I think it was 1978, it was the early 70s, when we weren't resuscitating a ton of people. We weren't bringing a lot of people back at that point.
Wait, so this is the man, you're cleaning his apartment, he's got stacks and stacks of stuff, and this is a paper he wrote when he was...
this is a paper a college student wrote about him.
Yes.
He was a test subject.
He was one of 3 people interviewed.
Who had an NDE.
Oh.
Yes.
I see.
And he'd been in a diving accident. He was a scuba diver where a tank had blown up on the dock next to him, and it actually blew apart his torso. And he was resuscitated. And the way he described the light was exactly the way I do, about being underwater and have it being sparkly and diffuse around the edges. And he described being in this circular room where he was reviewing his memories. And I just, as I'm reading, I was shaking and I lit up with goosebumps everywhere, and I started crying, because it was the first time that it was like, well, wait a minute. If someone else has also experienced the same thing under similar conditions, right? That's 2 sets of data points now. This can't be something I just made up. This can't be just a figment of my own imagination or the misfirings of my own anatomical brain, unless we both happen to have the exact same
Misfirings. Which
and
Eamon is mulling over right now. What are the odds?
Did he mention God's machine?
He didn't describe it that way. He didn't say machine. He said room. But again, even then, like, that's why I say in the very beginning, it's so hard to put into words, because it wasn't a slide projector. It wasn't a revolving door. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a room. It was something I've never seen or experienced that I don't have a way of describing to everyone else.
Right.
So
and what do you make of that? I mean, the similarity of those two experiences, but obviously when other people have near-death experiences, they have all kinds of experiences. What do you make of the fact that you and he had such similar ones, or how do you put this together in your mind?
Okay, this is a really big question. I have a sense that we see what we need to see based on where we are and what we need to do when we come back. Right? What information do we need? And what way can that information be presented that it will make the most sense to us, that it won't be scary, that we'll be able to absorb the information and assimilate it, integrate it, and do something with it. And so I don't know why he and I specifically were so similar, other than, to me, it very much feels like I needed that for my own validation. I was
going to say, that's another one of these synchronicities where if there was a higher intelligence plotting all of this out, it would be the perfect thing for you in order. Did that shift your experience then, seeing this paper?
Definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so I couldn't clean anymore. I completely stopped. I took this report and I went and went downstairs and sat on their couch and waited for them to return. Yeah. And they walked in and he sees, I have a tear-streaked face, my eyes are all swollen. I'm sitting here like my entire paradigm of the world has completely just been shattered.
Right.
And he walks in and he looks at me and sees what I'm holding, and first words out of his mouth, "You've seen."
Wow.
Like, that's some movie crap. Like, what was I supposed to do with that? Yeah. And he starts crying, I start crying, and he kind of looks at his wife, and she didn't know the entire story either. And so, because he'd been ridiculed, he'd been told, okay, you're off your rocker, okay, that's what the brain does, you made it up, and especially as a man, like, you just shut it down. Like,
he buried it in a stack of paper,
Yep, forget about it, pretend like it never happened.
And so he walks in, he sees you crying, and he just knows instantly that you guys have this connection. Were you holding the paper in your hand?
I was.
Yeah, he saw it.
Yeah. And so we just sat there and talked for hours, lots of tears, lots of...
Did you compare notes?
Tons, yeah, absolutely. Tons. He was just as emotional sitting across from me in 2018, right, as I was, and this was 5 years ago for me and almost 30, 40 years for him.
Yeah.
And that sense of welcoming and home was the biggest takeaway that he had as well, of just that longing, right, that homesickness feeling. Yeah.
Like that is my ultimate home, and I'm going back there someday.
Yeah. But we're here to visit. We're here to play a game. We're here to play these little roles and put on these little meat suits and get all serious about it.
You know what I think is so funny? When you said to the divine or source or whatever, you said, I'll be just a second, hold on just a second. From the perspective of divine, it is just a second,
exactly.
But for us, it's going to feel like 30 or 40 years, or let's say 60 years for you. I don't know. So what happened with Luke in terms of this progression for you? Like, when you came back from your experience, your near-death experience, did you tell him right away what had happened?
No. I actually told a couple of friends really briefly, not even the entire thing. Yeah. Both a doctor and a nurse, and immediately got shut down.
Yeah.
Right? Immediately told it was hallucinations and this is what a dying brain does and yada yada, so I stopped talking about it.
And you didn't even tell Luke?
No. We didn't talk about it until 18. Yeah, when I came home from that night was the first time we really dove into it.
Oh, wow.
So that paper not only confirmed it for you, but it opened it up with regard to Luke.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And does he think you died and came back?
Mm-hmm.
He does.
he sees in real time and witnesses kind of my after effects, which is also a very common thing that happens to people that have NDEs. That I have moments of precognition. I have moments of spontaneous mediumship. I have moments of claircognizance where I just know things that I didn't have access to.
Can you give us an example of how, like, now you're open to information that you weren't before?
Yeah. So I was driving around Albuquerque, and we have a pretty big houseless population, just like all big cities do. And there was a couple on the side of the road, and they had a whole setup, right? Their lawn chairs, the umbrella, the dog sitting there. It looks like a whole living room kind of setup. And I pull up to a stoplight, and I glanced over and made the briefest of eye contact with the man. And when I did, I heard audibly in the car, they need salads. Not food, not water, right? Very specific. And it was like, it was a male voice, and it was yelling basically. And it was so intense that I had both hands on the steering wheel, and I pulled them off. I was like, okay, like, why are you yelling at me? You know? And it was, again, it was odd, but it didn't freak me out. It was just like, okay, I'll get the salads. And so I went around the corner, and there's a Carl's Jr. I got 2 chicken salads and 2 bottles of water. And the way our freeway frontage road system is, it's kind of a mess. And so I had to make this big loop to get back. Drop off the salads and water. They say thank you. I have to make the loop again to get back to where I'm supposed to be. So now I'm at this light for the 3rd time. And I look over, and he's standing behind her, rubbing her back. And she is just sobbing, like ugly cry, bawling, holding a salad. And I can't help myself. I pull over again, walk over, and I'm like, hey, is everything okay? You know? And he looks at me literally like I have 3 heads and says, her father just died. He always had a vegetable garden, and we were talking about how long it's been since she had fresh vegetables, and then you walked up and handed us salads. And I welled up, and I looked at her, and I was like, your dad's okay. Enjoy your salad. And I got back in my car, and I pulled over, and I cried for 5 minutes. And I don't know, I don't understand what's actually happening there, right? Like, is there a ghost, a spirit standing on the course screaming they need salads? And I just happened to be the one porous enough to pick it up. I don't know. I don't know the answers, but I know that I was open enough to deliver a very important message to her. You know, and so thank you. And like, that's how I come away from those situations. And so there's been handfuls of these random events like that lead me to believe this was more than a dream. Because I didn't do those things before. That did not happen before.
You weren't handing out salads to the
I wasn't handing out random salads.
Let's check in with David for a second. So where are you now, David, with
well, she's so lovable and not crazy.
He's gonna, even if he didn't believe you, he'd just be nice and say
it's a very compelling, incredibly compelling, and I want so badly, like,
here we go,
to believe it, but I have this loop, you know, this playback in my mind that goes, that can't be, it's too good to be true. We created it because we needed an answer to a question that none of us have, and all of that. But
Danielle, can I share something with you? Because we were talking about guidance before, but this might be helpful for people. One of the things that guidance did tell me was one of the biggest hurdles to spiritual expansion, to getting closer and closer to the truth of who we are. One of the biggest hurdles is the sense it's too good to be true. Yeah. And your experience certainly speaks to that, because I mean, you're feeling this love, you're having all this wisdom, and you know,
and you're clearly so much better for it. I mean, that is as obvious as can be. So it is a powerful argument.
Danielle, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's just full of just so much information. You've even made a dent on David. So that's a great accomplishment, and I think your story will make a dent on a lot of people who watch this episode. So thank you so much for being here. This was great. I love this.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Realization Lab on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.